What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of 100 Yards Football and Sports Talk Radio. I'll be your host and producer this afternoon, Logan Landers, and join me here to do a little special episode, talk about the 2025 NBA Finals and their preview. It's going to be Brian LaBelle joining me today between, of course, the Indiana Pacers and the Oklahoma City Thunder. Brian, how's it going, man? And let's get your initial thoughts here on both these teams, how they got here, the Pacers and the Thunder, and we'll ultimately get into how we think this series will unfold.
I know there's a lot of buzz around it, talking about how you get two small market teams. I think a lot of people were pulling for the Knicks. The league was pulling for the Knicks, and they wanted more of a, more of a bigger audience that you're guaranteed with this. But I think a lot of people, real basketball fans, would be remiss not to be excited for this because I think these are two really good teams, and they showed us all playoffs, obviously, because they won all their series up until this point. And I think both teams deserve to be here. Both teams are really good. Pacers more under the radar. Obviously, Oklahoma City's been the best team in the league since we tipped back in October for the opener. But I really, really think this could be a very good series, and I'm actually pretty excited to get things kicked off tomorrow night.
Yeah, it's going to be a good series, we hope. And, the Thunder have been, they're at least really both these teams are two of the youngest teams in the league. The Thunder, for years, you've kind of been hearing about how obviously they've been stockpiling draft picks, and they still have a ton of draft picks in their back pocket if they want to trade for anyone this off season or use it for, to even move up in the draft. There's so many ways they can go about that. But they have really done a great job with building their team. For the most part, it's pretty much homegrown, right? A lot of these guys were drafted by OKC. I mean, you look at Shea, who they picked up, and he's developed, obviously, we know now, into the MVP. So you love to see that. And as for the Indiana Pacers, in a way, it's kind of the same. A lot of guys who either they drafted, with that team, with that franchise, or they picked up because some other teams just didn't feel like their talents were fitting there. I mean, look at Halliburton, who played with the Sacramento Kings, who they picked him up. And I know Sacramento is kicking themselves right now as the team that had a good year last year, but not this past season. But you see all the success. Obviously, Indiana had a good year last year, just couldn't get over the hump and getting to the finals. And with OKC, you see them now, first time in the finals since, I believe, 2012 for the Pacers, first time since, 2000. I believe when they lost to the Lakers. Both those teams are looking to get a win for the first time in 25 plus years, give or take. So I'm looking forward to it. But let's just talk about one team first, and then we'll switch over to that. Let's go with Indiana out there in the East, Brian. What are your thoughts on this team? Obviously, everyone knows Halliburton and kind of the I don't know if I say like a rise of Pascal Siakam, but him just kind of reminding the public and fans just how good he was, and also a guy who brings championship experience, having played with the Toronto Raptors when they won a couple of years ago. So talk about Indiana and how they mesh as a team.
Well, I think if you look at what Oklahoma City's been able to do through the first couple series, is they're going to identify your best player, and then they're going to say he's not going to beat us. And Nikola Jokic was the exception, but obviously you could still argue he's the best player in the league, right? I think Shea Gilgeous-Alexander deserved MVP, but Jokic being right behind him was, obviously warranted. The numbers he put up, I think he was averaging almost 30, 13, and 10 on the season, which is insane numbers. No one's ever done that, and he's second MVP voting. But they stifled him when they needed to. They did the same thing with Anthony Edwards in the conference finals, where it was almost embarrassing for a couple of those quarters, a couple of those stretches. But I think what the Pacers bring is there's not a single guy on the team that's going to carry them. Obviously, Halliburton's probably the star of the show, but Siakam went out and he scored 39 points, and it was seemingly easy, right, when he needed to. And I believe it was game 2 when they ended up winning that game in New York, because they went up 2-0 in New York. And Aaron Nesmith was hitting shots. Andrew Nembhard was hitting shots. TJ McConnell was coming in hitting shots. Thomas Bryant was hitting shots. Miles Turner. There's nobody on this roster that seems scared of the moment, seems scared of, hey, this is our first time here in the finals, whatever. They've thrown that out the window. Nobody's scared. They went into the Garden, which is one of the toughest places to play in all of sports, and they manhandled the Knicks. They did, which they had a raucous crowd. They had one of the best teams they've had in 2.5 decades, and they manhandled them. I mean, realistically, they got game 6, which, everyone was fired up for that, but the Knicks won game 5, but it was 3-1. And that closeout game wasn't even necessarily close. And the Knicks have a very good defense as well. And I think it kind of prepares you for the next level. I think they got a good coach. I think the problem that they're going to run into is obviously star power, right? I think Shea Gilgeous-Alexander kind of shades over Halliburton or Siakam, whoever else you have. And there's not a ton of, in this finals, there's not really a ton of NBA finals experience. You have Caruso on the other side, and you get Siakam here, but it's a lot of guys that are brand new to this. You know, they've never been here before. It's a different animal, obviously. Having all eyes only on you is going to be a new experience for most of these guys, but I like Oklahoma City. I think obviously they deserve to be the favorite, but I would not be surprised if the Pacers give them hell. And if I think it's gonna be a good series. I think the Pacers match up well. I think Oklahoma City's defense might be a little too stifling. I mean, from what I saw in the Minnesota series, it's just seemingly too much.
When I look at this Pacers team, going into it, a lot of people were like, well, it's Halliburton, who he had a good year last year. Let's see how he can build off of it, and Miles Turner, who's their veteran on the team. But if you didn't really follow the team, you didn't really know a whole lot about these guys for the most part, and just how well they played together as a team. Obviously, they picked up Siakam midway through the season, and he has just been that kind of extra spark plug they need for the offense, and he's looked great, right? Averaging about over 20 points a game, shooting great from the field as well, just under, I believe, 55%. So that's what you want from a guy at your power forwards position. Obviously, Halliburton has went in some games, he's red hot. Some days he is a little bit colder, though, in terms of just point scoring, but he's always going to get you assists. For the most part, it feels like. We know he had that one game this postseason where, what was it, the over 30 points, over 15 assists, over 10 rebounds, and no turnovers. He's the only player in NBA history to ever have that. So he has put his name in the history books with that. But some of the other players to kind of watch out for with who could have a good series here in the finals, like Benedict Mathurin, a guy who's on his second year, but he had 38 against the Knicks in one of those games, and he also had 23 and 9 in one of the Eastern Conference games. So someone he's a very streaky shooter, right? But if he gets hot at the right time, definitely someone to watch out for. Kind of that, he's not a 1 or 2 option, but just one of those other guys on the roster that can get hot if need be. And Obi Toppin, a guy who is a bench player, but he did have in the Bucks series career high 21 points against them. So just another guy who, if he can get hot, if his shots are dropping, it's going to be tough to stop. And we know Indiana is also a very good defensive team as well. They're not obviously as good as OKC, but they do have some guys who are some rim protectors, like we mentioned with Miles Turner, a guy who's been there for close to 10 years, who can also shoot the 3-ball a little bit as well. So I think Indiana, and also we know they play with that tremendous pace as well. They like to get on the fast break. They like to play quick. They don't like to just dribble the ball around. They like to pass the ball around, get the good shots. And obviously 9 times out of 10, they're going to fall since they're in this position. But I want to ask about the OKC Thunder now. And as I said earlier, a team who just kind of ran through the league this year, 68-14 overall record, best record in franchise history. And they were winning by a lot of points too. It wasn't like they were winning, super close games. They were beating teams by 10 plus. It felt like all season. And a lot of people are kind of already, crowning them champions, just based off of the roster that they've built, and just how well, synergized they are. But obviously talked about OKC. We know a lot about Shea, but I know you mentioned that a lot of these guys do not have postseason experience. A few of them do, but they're obviously looking to capture that title now. But what are your thoughts on the Thunder coming into this series?
Well, I think no one really talked about it, but one of the best moves going back to last offseason was they added Isaiah Hartenstein. They said, hey, we need a centerpiece in the middle. We like Chet Holmgren. We don't think he's that guy, at least yet. Kind of takes someone off. And even if it takes some pressure off him, but even if he's not a guy that's going to score a bunch of points, he's going to grab you 5 or 6 rebounds. He'll get a couple of garbage time baskets, put rebounds, put backs. And he'll give you 4 or 5 fouls, and you're not really worried about that. And it allows them to rotate defensively, especially the wings. They got almost everybody can guard 1 through 4. They rotate really, really well. They move around a lot. Caruso's really good at that. He's kind of developed that reputation as like, hey, he's really good on defense, but part of that's because he doesn't have to score because you have Shea on that end. And then Shea can kind of play both, which gets overlooked as well. Jalen Williams is fantastic. There's not a lot of weak points on this team. There's not really anybody that you can kind of attack and say, hey, this is who we're going to go after. And I think a lot of people tell you, when you get to these games and you get to the higher stakes series, like you would the conference finals or the finals, is you're as strong as your weakest link, right? Like there's points where the ball is going to find you, and that's going to be highlighted because you're only going to be as good as your worst player because he's going to be attacked. They're going to go after him. They're going to prove a point. and say, hey, we think we could beat you here. But there's not really anybody on the roster that Oklahoma City has that you can do that to. They're very, very good 1 through 8, 1 through 9, depending on how they're going to rotate. I know obviously everything gets condensed in the finals. You're probably going to have 4 or 5 guys that won't see the floor, but for a couple minutes, and that's only for foul trouble. But what they were able to do, I mean, they stifled Anthony Edwards. They stifled Nikola Jokic at times. The first couple games of that series was very back and forth, and Shea kind of got flack for shooting poorly, but Jokic did too. I mean, nobody could really score, and it became kind of it's their staple. They can score a lot of points. They can slow the game down. I know people make fun of Shea Gilgeous-Alexander for all the free throws or whatever. Fine, but that's their game plan. They want to slow the game down. They want to play defense. They want to get easy points at the free throw line, and it works. And it's worked all season. And they're 4 wins away from a title, and they're the favorite to do so.
When I look at this Thunder team, obviously you're going to look at the MVP now and Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. A lot of people thought, last year he had, I believe, a couple of votes to win, but this year he took home the hardware. And, rightfully so with the just kind of crazy season that he putting up, 32, almost 33 points per game, over 6 assists, over 5 rebounds. Well-deserved. And like you said, a lot of people, clown on him for making a lot of free throws, for shooting a lot of free throws. But I mean, James Harden did that just, 10 years ago. He was getting free throws like there was no tomorrow, and he won MVP, and he was, the leading scorer in the league and whatnot. But with Shea, he can just kind of do everything. He's a great shooter. He can defend as well.
Yeah.
He's like the ultimate player in terms of who you want leading your franchise. And obviously, he's done some great work for OKC, but you mentioned some of the other players that they added along the way to really help them get there this season. Isaiah Hartenstein, who New York decided not to pick up, and they might be wishing now that they kept him. I know they got Cat, right, but I felt like maybe you could have put Hartenstein maybe at power forward, Cat at center, flip them back and forth, whatever it may be. That could have been better, but I know sweet for him to for him to go forward ahead of his old team in New York as they're watching this series from home now. And of course, Alex Caruso, who's been around the league now for quite some time, but he can get you points if he needs to. He's not a dynamic scorer or anything, but he can get you some points. You mostly get him there, for his energy that he provides coming off the bench or his defensive ability. And, we talked about how this team, for the most part, a lot of these guys are 25, 26 and under. So they're young. Indiana's, they got some young legs also, but they are a super young core. They can play great defense. I mean, you mentioned Jalen Williams. He's an all-star this past season, got third team All-NBA, also all-defensive second team. And I don't hear a whole lot of people talking about just how really well-balanced he is as a player, as that kind of, second option on this Thunder team. Obviously you look at Shea, obviously he's the main target, but Jalen Williams, he can shoot the ball. You've got other great players like Lou Dort, right, who's just a defensive juggernaut. He's going to stand in front of anyone. It wouldn't surprise me if he's the one who's guarding. If Shea doesn't guard him, I think Lou Dort would guard Halliburton. You'll see some switches there at some point, and it's going to be tough, I think, for Tyrese, because Tyrese, I think he's a tremendous player. He's going to have to get. I think he'll average probably 10 assists throughout the finals, just because he's not going to get a whole lot of easy buckets throughout this game or throughout the series, because of just all the quick pieces that the Thunder have. You mentioned Chet Holmgren, who unfortunately missed last season due to that injury, but he's looked good this year. He's looked really good, and you see why the Thunder picked him. It's such an early spot in the draft. He's great on defense. He can get you good shot blocking as well. What is going to be interesting for me, though, is if the Pacers decide to go kind of old school and get him down in the paint, if they go with Siakam, who can play in the post, or if you go with Turner, who is kind of more the modern-day center, modern-day big, who's mostly going to shoot threes, but he does have the weight advantage over Chet Holmgren, who we know is a little bit skinnier. But if they decide to go that route, then then Indiana, I think, could get some points in the paint where they kind of thrive, right? And I know OKC can do that as well, but that is kind of one aspect I'm looking at, to where if the Pacers want to win that series, then that could be something they could exploit. But I think overall, just to kind of put a bow on it here, I think this is a really good franchise, really good teams here. You mentioned kind of smaller market teams who don't get a whole lot of media love. They're not the Knicks, they're not the Lakers, they're not the Celtics. It's two teams who, come from, Indiana and Oklahoma. You don't
Yeah.
think of basketball royalty for the NBA for those here in recent years. You think Indiana, you think of college hoops. And for Oklahoma, you think of football, right? So it's nice to see that, two franchises who don't typically make the finals are going at it this year. But I think for me, Brian, I'm going to go with my final prediction for the entire series. We're just going to do it all in one video here. I will go with the Oklahoma City Thunder winning the championship. I'll have it in 6 games. I think that the Pacers will put up a hell of a fight. But ultimately, I just think that it's going to be hard to stop the MVP of the league, hard to stop Chet Holmgren, the great defense they have. As good as the Pacers are, and I do think they're going to give them a great challenge. I think we're going to have some close games. I don't think there's going to be any blowouts, at least I hope not. So I'll go with the Oklahoma City Thunder taking home the championship in 6 games for this matchup here. Brian, what are your final thoughts here as we talk about the final NBA series here of this 2025 campaign?
I'm leaning Oklahoma City as well. I think in 5 or 6 games, I think all the games are going to be kind of close. I don't think you'll see a whole lot of blowouts. Hopefully not, at least from a viewer's perspective, and someone who just wants to watch and enjoy it. But I think game 1 is going to be really important. I think whoever can come out and take game 1 is going to set the tone early. I think that's kind of cliche, but if you're Oklahoma City, I don't want to say it's a must win, but you don't want the Pacers, who have all the confidence in the world right now, right? They're breaming. There's, like I was saying earlier, no one on this team is afraid of the moment in any capacity. If they can come out and take game 1 and go up 1-0, because then there's no pressure game 2, right? Then you can't go down 2-0 going back to our place. But if that's the case, I think there's going to be some trouble for Oklahoma City, because then I think their backs are against the wall, and I think you'll start to see that lack of experience as far as, deep playoff runs. Obviously, you got Hartenstein and Caruso, like we mentioned earlier, but there's really no one else who's been in this moment yet. I really like how the Pacers rotate too on defense. I think they match up really well. I think they're kind of mirrors of each other. I think Oklahoma City's just a little better. Obviously, I think that's why you got them picked, but I like the prediction. I think Oklahoma City in 6 is a fair prediction. I would not be surprised if this series goes 7. I wouldn't be surprised if it goes 4 or 5. But I think all the games are going to be close. I think it's going to be a good series. I think the Pacers are going to give them hell, but I think Oklahoma City just a little bit better, just a little too much.
And we will see what happens. Obviously, we know that the first game of the series tips off Thursday night, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is when that is going to get kicked off. And from then on there out, we will just be going throughout the game, seeing how they go. And that's our picks. We're both going with the Thunder in that. So we think they're going to take on the championship. But we want to hear from you, though, our fans in our comment section, either on Facebook or YouTube. Let us know who's going to win the finals. It's going to be the Oklahoma City Thunder or the Indiana Pacers. Well, for my co-host today, Brian LaBelle, thank you so much, man, for coming on the show, talking about the 2025 NBA Finals and how we think it's going to shake out. I've been your host and producer, Logan Landers. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, everyone, and be sure to go watch some basketball on Thursday night.